Hi and welcome back. In this chapter, we will introduce you to the concept of pivot tables. Pivot tables are the nervous system of analytics in Excel. They are the biggest reason why I still use Excel even after knowing a lot of advanced tools like SAS, SPSS, etc. Also, pivot table is a very exhaustive topic. We'll quickly cover the basics of pivot tables and then move on to their usage in day-to-day analysis. So what are pivot tables? They are one of the most powerful tools available for data exploration. So what they really do is they convert any column-based data into any report we want. So pivot tables take data in column format and then allow us to arrange the data in whatever format we want. And that flexibility is what makes them so powerful to use. Before we deep dive into the way they work, a few terminologies which I would want to introduce to you. These terminologies are applicable for any reporting which you do. So let's say this is a typical report which you have. So filter fields are fields which you essentially leave out from this report. For example, if you want to exclude a few cities from this report, they will go into filter fields. Column fields are the fields which are laid out in column, whereas row fields are fields which are laid out in rows. And the value fields are fields which are arranged or reported as per this column and row. So they essentially fill out the entire space. So all of this is value fields. Let me take an example to explain this. So let's say you want to report your customers by gender and city. So how would the report look like? So the report would have gender, let's say, on column, city in row, and then number of customers in the value field. So essentially, once you have all these four parameters, you can define any report you want. Before we move forward, let's quickly understand the concept of dimensions and metrics. So dimensions are essentially attributes which describe an object. So let's go back to the first insurance example. In this case, the dimensions for your customers could be age, gender, city. So metrics are the parameters which essentially measure the dimensions. So these could be, for example, premium, it could be vintage of your customer. A thing to note, so dimension and metric are context dependent definitions. So it's not necessary that a particular dimension always remains dimension, a particular metric always remain metric. So for example, if you want to look at number of cities on an average where a customer has lived, so in this, the city essentially is now a metric. Let us try and understand working of pivot tables through an example. So as I said, pivot tables take input in form of column-based data. So let's say this is table A, which is arranged in columns. So let us say these are the attributes which you have arranged in these columns. So now, once you select these columns and convert it into a pivot table, this essentially gives you a flexibility to arrange your data, which is these columns, into any reports. It will have all the four components which will look. So filter tables, column attributes, row attributes, and value fields. So going back to your first insurance example, you can put gender on column, you can put city in rows, and then ID. So you can put count of customer ID in your value fields. In this particular case, there is no filter field, but let's say you wanted to put a filter on a particular product. So you want to only analyze, let's say, protection products. So you can put a filter over here and all the report will change dynamically according to this product. So let's quickly move to Excel, where we'll do a live demonstration of how to create a pivot table. We'll use the same first insurance customer dataset to create this pivot table. Please note that this is a simple example because we want to focus on the process of creating pivot table. Usually you will use pivot table on bigger data set. So how to insert a pivot table? We'll start by selecting your data. To insert pivot table, it will ask you which range to select. So select your range, or if the data is in table format, select in table. Select whether you want to insert it in a new worksheet or existing worksheet. In this case, I'm using it in new worksheet. Say OK. So here you get all the 4 attributes of a report which we mentioned, and all you need to do is drag and drop fields into the relevant columns. So for example, if you want to look at gender and city and count of customers, this is all you need to do, and it has given you the in this particular case by default it has selected sum of customer ID, so you need to change that to count of customer ID. So for that you go to value field settings and then select as count. So this report simply tells you how your 12 customers are located in various cities. So this is just an example of how to create a pivot table. Let's quickly go back to the presentation and understand a few important variations of pivot tables. Now that we have understood how to create pivot table, let's quickly walk through a few variations of pivot tables which I have just listed down here. So I'll just explain this through an example. Let's say you have created a pivot table. On your column fields, let's say you have put product, and on your row fields you have put salesperson. So what you're trying to analyze is which salesperson has sold what kind of products, and your value to start with is, let's say, number of sales which each salesperson has done. So by default this pivot table will show you the sales which each salesperson has done, and will have column totals and row totals. Now sometimes you are essentially interested in what a particular person is doing. So you want to look at, let's say there is a salesperson named Kunal. You want to look at how Kunal is doing, or which products is Kunal selling. So what you really want to do is, out of all the sales which Kunal has done, you want to look at the distribution within these products. So if I have done, let's say, 10 sales, you want distributed among various products, you want to look at these fields in terms of the percentage of total. So that's essentially percentage of a row. So so this is 20%. Similarly, you can also look at total of columns. So in this particular case, if you want to look at sales of a particular product and then see which salesperson has actually sold it the most. So let's say a product X was sold by various salesperson. So now if you want to look at which person sold what percentage of this product, you can look at it by taking percentage of column. Similarly, you can also take percentage of the total value, whatever it is. So these are 3 important variations which help you understand your data. The sum based or count based variation depends on the value which you are using in the pivot table. So sometimes you want to, you are interested in actually count of sales rather than sum of sales. So in this case, if you are interested in number of sales, you'll use count. If you are interested in the premium which you've got through sales, you'll use sum. And finally, you can also use a few calculated values. So for example, if you are interested in the average premium which you get from each customer, you can calculate it by total premium divided by number of sales, and that should give you the average premium by each salesperson and product. So these are some important variations. So in summary, pivot tables are a very powerful tool to explore your data, to figure out what is the data saying to you, and there are these variations which we have seen which make it more powerful. In the next video, we'll take an example and show some of these variations at work. Thank you for watching this video.